call the meeting to order. And I will turn on my mic. And I guess we'll go through the facility use report.
Yep, so I'll start us off while Mr. Kreider gets ready to fire up the slides there. As we talked about earlier this year when we were setting up our work session topics, there are some things now that are coming front and center with next steps for facility use. Today we'll be discussing primarily what that picture looks like for our next elementary site. And of course, from when the bond was passed and that initial planning happened, some variables are the same, some might be just a little bit different. And in the meantime, we had a little pandemic roll through. So now we're regrouping to look at what do we need to do for decision points this fall, depending on what we want to confirm that we're going to do. So we'll turn it over to Mr. Kreider to go through kind of the lay of the land specific to our elementary site.
Good afternoon. Look forward to going through this with you again. Some of this will be familiar. I think we had a little bit of this in the last one, so we'll get started. But the work session today, I'll talk about enrollment projections, finalize the elementary site, determine the architectural approach, whether it's going to be a plan reuse or a new design, and then timelines of construction, elementary boundaries, setting process, transition plan for students switching to schools. We won't get in a lot of detail there, just kind of talk about where we need and what school might be affected. And then related items, which would be the learning map. So with that, we'll keep going here. But I'm going to turn it right over to Todd on elementary enrollment projections from what was original and what is today. So.
Thanks. So in 2018, we'd projected what is the blue line on here, and then the orange line. The orange line is actual, what happened in 19, what happened in 20, what happened in 21, and what happened in 22. And then everything after that is the projection going forward. So you can see we're actually above the projection at first. The first year was about right on. The second year was kind of significantly over it, almost 130 or so over it. Then COVID hit. So FY21, we took a drop. The drop was 533 elementary kids. And the next year we had a little slight drop of 48. Then when you get to that point, then the projection going forward is kind of back on our pace, maybe not quite as quick, but back on our old pace. We had projected 132 increase this year. And as of a couple of days ago, we were at 11,321 and we had projected 11,277. So we were 44 above our projection. So that's nice. I think I saw an enrollment today that was 3 more than that. So we're even a little bit more than that. So we look like we're kind of back on path going forward. And you can see we'll be back up to 11,642 if our projection holds out into 2027. Obviously, that's not as high as we thought it would be, but we were going to build a school around 2023. So we've got crowded schools, especially in certain parts of town, and it's well, Jeff will show you where we're looking at building it, but we're kind of back to normal. It looks like on our growth pattern.
Okay, so we want to talk about elementary sites. We have the Northwest site by McGovern Middle School. And that was the original schedule. That's what's in the original plan, what we planned on. Street construction, we've had several meetings with the city, developer, and those sort of things. And it's looking like that the streets will actually start going in pending an agreement here in December with the developer and city, would be the summer of 2023. So everything is looking like that road will happen whether our elementary is going in or not on that site. And then there's a potential school park site between 26th and 22nd. This would be in the Lennox land, that utility, but One issue with that is utilities wouldn't be available till 26, 27. They have to run from 12th Street up. They're planning on the next 2 years to get it to 12th Street, then they have to work on getting it up to our site on 22nd Street. And there's landowners and those sort of things they have to work through. So they're projecting 26, 27 to have that available on any land in that developmental area. So a little bit on those sites. You can see George McGovern. The circle is the Northeast Elementary site. We own that site. The park is to the left of that circle. That hasn't really been, it's been seeded, but it hasn't been graded out. And once the road profiles and those sort of things are established, we can do that. And we do have dollars in the budget to start the survey work in that area. Okay, and this is the preliminary layout. It's pretty accurate, I believe, of the developer. So you can see what's happening just west of Jefferson. That would be on the right side of that slot. Then you have the drainage way. And then they've actually started moving dirt on that development in that green and yellow area. So they plan on working from the north to the south and with that loop road. Before they open that whole south or that east section on the right by Future Elementary, they have to get that road, whether it's temporary or permanent. And we think it's right to get it permanently done because there'll be too many houses for a one-way in and one-way out. So they have to loop around our site of George McGovern and get that completed in that time frame. Okay, the new West Side Elementary would be where that circle is, somewhere in there. We've looked at, about 40 acres. We had only purchased 20, 10 for school, 10 for parks. And we met with the city and they're on board to partner with us as well in this area. We haven't finalized any exact locations yet, but the developer is willing to talk with us. We've talked to them. And so it's there and our opportunity is there. And I think all the bases are covered of us getting a potential site in that general area. The Northwest Elementary site or school would be about 84,000 square feet, designed for 680 students. We have AE construction and site work that we'll need to budget for, street construction, that'd be utilities, streets, those sort of things. Then land, if we go to another site, we'll have to budget additional dollars for the purchase of that land. And assessment and zoning costs, furnishing equipment, library books and equipment. And our initial estimates are based on a modified plan reuse of Susan B. and Sotomayor. Those are, some people don't realize that, but they're the actual same school footprint, but they made a lot to look differently. Right now we have about $22 million in the overall budget. And as you know, construction has kind of gone through the roof lately. So there'll have to be some modifications with that, but I still think we'll probably be able to cover that with our savings that we've had in the overall CIP plan. So that's our hope anyway.
Can you tell me another elementary school that's about 680 students, just for comparison? Is that what, like Sonia?
That's pretty much all the new ones we've done.
Okay.
Recently in the last probably 15 years.
Okay.
Okay, the architectural approach, we have a couple options. We can continue on our path for the modified plan reuse of the Sotomayor. That one was actually taking Susan B. Anthony and taking the better parts and looking at difference and kind of doing that. And I would think if we do this plan reuse, we'd do the same thing. We would look at, is there anything we would change, anything we need to do differently or whatnot. We have talked to principals that's kind of served in a single story versus a two-story, and that principal says, I would go to the two-story one. It's a lot more efficient for staff and students as well. So that's kind of why we've thought of that as a plan reuse potential. We'd have a potential savings on the AE costs and engineering of about $400,000. And we also would get the project done about a year earlier, which could save us another about $1 million in inflationary costs. And that's at a 5%, and we're probably a little higher than that currently. New design, we would completely, if we went to a new design, we would completely do a new school plan. We would have an opportunity to develop a new elementary prototype that we could use in the future. But it will take it would take a little longer time to put the design teams together and develop that plan. Okay, the timelines for plan reuse would begin the modification process this fall, 22. Bid sometime summer of 23 with the school open of 25. That should give us plenty of time. We're not going to, at the current construction climate, we're not going to, we used to put them up in 14 months. I don't think we can do that in 14 months under the current state and logistics of material procurement, and also the construction dynamics in Sioux Falls. With those two major projects, that's really taken a lot of the subcontractors away. And new design construction, if we go down that path, we would do a RFP for architectural services this fall in 22. We develop the plans in 23, and then bid the project in the spring of 24 with an opening in 26.
Jeff, can you go back to that slide? The timeline slide. One thing that we've talked about, just kind of thinking big picture programmatically as well as school and just population, is either way, there's still opportunity to think programmatically, and we have plenty of time to do that. So if we, want to consider any choice program, any type of theme, or connect to some of our pathways, that can come separately from the decision about moving forward with the actual facility, which I think is on a different timeline. So just kind of keep that in mind, that we still have time to talk about what goes in there as well as just building the new facility.
Another quick question. At the time when we did the initial planning, which would have been, 4 years ago now?
Yeah, probably 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. At that time, the fastest growing area of the city was southeast Sioux Falls, with projections that the Northwest in the next 10 years would have that population. I'm just wondering, given the growth of the Southeast, how our current elementaries have been able to accommodate that. Are they looking okay? Just curious where we're at on that wave.
Yeah, I think Todd can probably, he's got some of those projections broke down by areas like he did during that planning process. And I think there's kind of a plan for that, what might happen.
And we certainly don't have to cover it, now. I'm just.
Yeah, we actually have an enrollment report. It's a good question, because we'll spend more time on that on Monday with a board report, and Todd's got some of that, but that will also be Doug's enrollment report. But it's a good question because it's what else has been happening. Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly. Yeah, the southeast schools are pretty crowded. But as you work your way just a little bit to the west, they're not very crowded. We just need to look at some boundaries. We're busing some kids from further west out to Rosa Parks right now. And we just got to look at, when we do boundary changes at elementary, we got to look at making some adjustments to that to relieve the very far east schools, and then the schools into the middle of the town. It's kind of like move the kids west. If they're on a bus, you might maybe move them one school over to the west, something like that. So the west side's pretty full. The northwest is really getting full. The east, the very far east is full, but there is some room kind of right in here in the middle of the city.
So in addition, we will look at boundaries as well as those thematic schools as part of our good. We can retake a holistic picture.
I would say it's adjustments, probably not a whole rebounding process, but where, now that we've done the rebounding, where do we need to maybe tweak some things just by a bit to accommodate for where the fastest growth is?
Next, we really looked at that for high school, middle school, as opposed to elementary, which the dynamics change.
Yep, it's a very fluid picture right now, because when you think about it, it's the entire city that's growing in all directions, which makes it complicated but exciting.
Okay. Okay, some timelines, the elementary boundaries, setting transition plan for students. And this would probably be what either site, we'd have to go through this. But, you know, the impacted schools would be Hayward, Oscar Howe, Discovery, JFK, Pettigrew, the new school in Renberg. So we would have to look at all these schools on that west side, whole west side corridor, per se, when that new school came online. So during the construction process, we'll be working on that boundary and how that would all shake out. So we would balance some of that, the load. And then you have to do some future planning. So some of that development to the west probably won't happen until 26, 27, when sewer starts happening over there. So there's some dynamics there that we'll have to make sure we kind of plan for as we do that. So on the related items, in the budget currently, we put a project in there as the learning lab renovations, I'm calling it. There's 3 existing science classrooms in that area that are not being used. I think we have some storage stuck inside there. Look at renovating those to 3 early childhood classrooms. I've met with Sue and we've gone through some of that. A lot of stuff that is compatible in both, you know, that are existing. But then we'd install a play structure on the north side, try to integrate that, and then we'd move 3 early childhood rooms from Hayward into that learning lab, and it would ease their capacity problems that they have now as we wait to bring the new school online. So we got about 2.5 years to wait, and that would help that building immensely during that time period. We currently have a big chunk of it in this current year, and then we would pick up the rest of it after the bids in the next fiscal year, because they'll go through that summer. But the idea would be is next fall we would be ready to go with those rooms. So that'll help a little bit in the interim. And administrative recommendations, we're throwing this out there, but then we can have some discussions about it, is construct that elementary on a designated site adjacent to McGovern as per the original plans. Use a modified plan reuse process and open the school for the 2025 school year. And then future land acquisition is pursue that future elementary site with the developers out there, so we have another site available. And this is probably a good time to do that, because after they start building, it's really tough to get. So get that for that next elementary on the west side. But I don't think it's gonna, current projections not slowing down. So with that, I think we open it up for questions and some discussions.
Any questions?
I kind of like the idea of having it out by George McGovern, only because I think there's a lot of nice things that happen between like Discovery and Memorial right now. And so to have kind of that same pairing is nice, just location wise. We already own the land, and that's kind of the thought going forward. And I do think when you look at the schools that you had listed there, you know, kind of pulling that area up can kind of help to skinny down some of those other locations and make it maybe more of a natural shift in population versus kind of pulling people outwardly when that school over there is going to have its own neighborhood. Just like I feel like a new school up in the Northeast is definitely, or the Northwest is going to have definitely its own kind of neighborhood too. But I don't know, I like the idea of adding to more community in that area, which seems like it's kind of in like a barren land right now. And so if you can get you'll get more houses, you'll get obviously more commercial things will follow, but just you look around at any place we built a school and boom, like everything kind of comes up. And so that seems like, to me, it seems like a good fit budget wise and like location wise too.
And Jefferson.
Yes.
nearby,
Yeah.
when you think about teacher
Yeah.
pathway and some of those things.
It's kind of fun. I've seen at some of the volleyball games I've been at, I've seen parents wearing T-shirts that say Northwest is best, and it has like a George McGovern and then a Jefferson, kind of logo on it. And I love that community has really embraced that relationship. And so, again, to that same point, now you could add an elementary school to that picture of this is like a cohort of people. This is a community of people that can really work together to make that a positive learning place for all of those, K-12 areas.
Well, I think too about, Sonia and Edison and having that, I mean, even though it's a few blocks away, it's still that relationship, between the two schools, and it's very advantageous to have that. I would agree with everything you say. I think I'll just add that obviously a reuse of plans, elementary school plans, makes obviously financial sense, but I mean, I've had kids at both Susan B. and Sonia, and they're great schools. They're very efficient in how they flow, and yes, we can always learn from design that maybe missed the mark, but it seems to me to make most sense to redesign, a repurpose of current plans versus trying to bid and
Well, from a timing perspective,
too. Yeah.
A little bit is that the city and the developer is going to put that walking bridge over that walkway that we negotiated when we bought that site. So that's going to happen in this time frame as well. So that should be in place so that neighborhood will have a walking
Nice.
area to that. And that's a lot of apartments, a lot of houses going into that
Yeah.
section. So
So for clarity purposes, my understanding, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, or Jeff, is that if we proceed as planned, there's not a board vote that necessarily needs to happen unless you would change the trajectory of the current plan. I just want to get clarity of what is
Not until we
required of the
start
board.
hiring people,
Right,
architects
that
and
we
whatnot.
put it in motion.
yeah, that's just, I mean, we're about a year behind what we're projecting, but we're on the same course of what that original plan.
Right.
was.
I'm in.
That's
That's
okay.
the way to go.
Get him a shovel. He's ready.
I can run a track machine too, so.
There's a lot happening in that northwest corridor, so.
Yeah.
And I know the Baker Farm, they're from Kansas City, and they're starting to work on developing. The Vanderwoody area to the north is for sale now too, as well. So you'll probably see that starting to change as well.
And there are coffee shops emerging, which tells you a lot about
Yeah.
future populations, I think, just when you start to see retail emerging where there was none even 2 years ago when I came. It was,
Yeah, it was sort of no
Looks
man's
very
land
different
when
already.
we built
Mhm.
George McGovern, but yeah, it's really built up over the years.
Yeah.
If
And
you
I-
build it, they will come.
Well, elementaries really are magnets.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea too of having like the track and football field, like all of those things that like an elementary could, whether they use it for a field day or like an evening activity or something. It's just another nice facility to have available that people are used to seeing, or kids could walk over and watch a middle school game, or it's just a community building place for people to gather. And
Where we have them together like that really works well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reputation. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. We'll get things rolling.
Good. Okay. Anything for the good of the cause? Hmm? Okay. All right. Well, can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
so moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you very much.